Hi, this is Phil Kaveny back again, and I feel like a juggler with about 15 balls in the air. But let it be that way because that's the way I like it. I just got off the phone with the friend of my lifetime, David Yolton. He was my college roommate 56 years ago when I was at what was then Stevens Point State College, which is now Stevens Point, University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, for my freshman year when my mind caught on fire for literature. Now, it was a very surprising experience because I wasn't a particularly literate type. And I had this English teacher. Her name was Hazel Coscalena. And she sort of looked like a good-natured beagle, but she ate wrestlers for lunch, and football players, and just about anybody else you could think of. And I remember this magic moment when we were doing work on the play Othello by Shakespeare. And this was the story of the love affair of Othello, the giant Moor, which was what it meant to be black then. You were called a Moor. And Desdemona, who was his love, and Iago, the evil man that drove Othello to madness to murder Desdemona. And so we read through it, and I kind of liked it because the idea of a giant Moor, a huge, powerful black man, kind of appealed to me because I was a huge, powerful white man and a heavyweight wrestler. And she said, "Mr. Kaveny, can you describe the physical appearance of Othello?" And I said, "Oh yeah, he looked like Sonny Liston." And she said, "Who, Mr. Kaveny?" And at that time, Sonny Liston was a world heavyweight boxing champion. And he had a dark countenance and an intense look. And he was the man who Cassius Clay, who later became Muhammad Ali, fought for the world heavyweight title. And everybody thought that the bear would just eat Muhammad Ali alive, and Muhammad Ali won. But nevertheless, Sonny Liston had this darkness and this power and this vengeance about him. And so I said, well, you look like that. So I had a New Yorker magazine. And it had a picture of Sonny Liston with a bike, wearing nothing but a bike. A bike is a kind of a male item of clothing that we wear for support, as a matter of fact. So I brought the picture in of Sonny Liston in the New Yorker magazine, and I said, "This is Sonny Liston who looks like Othello." She said, "Why, thank you, Mr. Kaveny. I'll take that." And then I had a wrestling match. And she said, when I said I need to get off to catch the bus, she said, "Well, good luck, Mr. Kaveny." She got me reading. And I read a number of books my freshman year. I ran into poets. And suddenly my mind was on fire. And stuff I had never thought about before was reaching into me. One of the books we read, and I haven't read them since, and I still remember them, and I probably should read them again because of some stuff I recently learned in psychology as a lifelong student. One of the things we read was The Wall by John Hershey. And this was, remember, I'm talking about 1962, 1963, and we're less than 20 years from the end of the Second World War. And we're less than 20 years from the Holocaust. And we're less than 20 years from continental Europe being almost uninhabitable, including the Soviet Union, because of these immense historical events which just smashed through people's lives. So that I can say that probably during the Second World War, when the planet had a population of less than 2 billion, something like 60, 70, or 80 million of them died horrible deaths between the combatants and the non-combatants. But I was reading the literature that tried to encompass these historical events. And one of the things that I'm still working on, and maybe this is going to kick it off because I've been interested in it for a lifetime, is Afro-American literature, and a particular Afro-American writer named Ralph Ellison, who I keep promising my publisher I'm going to finish the introduction to the essay collection I want to deal with, which is a tribute to him. And I remember I always had kind of a sensibility to civil rights. I just had a feeling that it was the right thing, we should be doing it. I was actually in 4th grade for the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court decision, which overruled Plessy versus Ferguson, which overruled the separate but equal doctrine. And being a really smart kid, when my racist teacher in 4th grade, Miss Schultz, said something very disparaging about black people, I said I would be happy to have a black girl sitting next to me. And then I said something very rude to her and got sent home. And she all, well, that's another story. Then there's another famous civil rights case which gave me this sympathy, so to speak. It was called the Emmett Till case. You almost always study it in any American history class. But the thing is that when it came out, Emmett Till was only a couple years older than me. And it was a story of a 14-year-old black boy, young black man, who was in vacation from Chicago, going down to Mississippi, and he whistled at a white woman and maybe made some kind of catcall remarks, they call them. And my mother said, and he was murdered brutally. And his mother displayed his body in an open coffin so you could see what had been done to him. But anyway, my mother said something that really made me mad, and I said, look, I do what he does all the time. How would you feel if somebody did that to me? Yeah, I didn't get along too well with my family. But anyway, I carried this sensibility into this English class, and we had to do a term paper. I had no idea what a term paper was, but you take a topic. And so I ended up with this thesis statement, which was a study of the black man as his environment, as seen by Richard Wright, who wrote, Native Son, and Franklin Fraser, a very famous Afro-American sociology, and of course Ralph Ellison, who wrote the book Invisible Man. And it's probably the best paper of my life. I wrote it when I was 18, and the question I ask myself now, 56 years later, is I want to gather an essay collection around Ralph Ellison being really significant for the 3rd generation of the 21st century, is that something happened to my mind that happens to young people somewhere in their teens, where they go through something called a neurological pruning process. And certain connections in your brain, this comes from Dr. Matthews in our psych department, and the whole body of literature, changes the way you think about things, changes the way you perceive things, perhaps brings you to a level of moral awareness. And you know, I was still the college heavyweight wrestler, but I was never the same after I'd had this literary experience.